For Creamer Media's Polity, I'm Shannon de Rehove. Author, political activist and Professor Raymond Suttner is in the studio to discuss his take on nationalisation, the Freedom Charter, and how that important document should be speaking to the South Africa of current times. Welcome, Raymond.
Thank you very much.
Now, firstly, could you provide some flavour as to how the Freedom Charter was crafted and how nationalisation found its way into that document?
Yes, the Freedom Charter is quite a controversial document, but my evidence, and this evidence can be found, if you go up to Wits and you go to historical papers, you can see handwritten demands. In 1953, Professor Z.K. Matthews proposed that they should gather demands from ordinary people as to what they want, what their problems were, and what type of South Africa they would want to see. Now, this was very important because in 1952, just before that, the ANC had launched the Defiance campaign, opposing unjust laws. They broke the law. This was not the first time, but this is the first time that ordinary people were asked throughout the rural areas, the urban areas, what did they want in the Freedom Charter. They launched what was called a call to the people for the Freedom Charter. And in these historical papers at Wits, UNISA, all these places, you can see these handwritten demands. Some of them are very eccentric, like I want the right to have a whole lot of wives and what have you. So when the demands were gathered, you couldn't put in every demand. There were thousands of demands. So a committee built a consensus document. Now, some people say Rusty Bernstein wrote the Freedom Charter. It's not correct. No one person could write it. Now, he may have been very important in coordinating it, but the consensus document tried to incorporate all these demands, and some people were not satisfied, although the majority of people seemed to be satisfied, because the Freedom Charter, no one said, no, my demands are not in the Freedom Charter. They could see themselves there. But it's important to note historically that the Pan-Africanist Congress broke from the ANC over the Charter, and Chief Albert Luthuli initially was not happy with the clauses about the country's wealth, and he came to accept it. And so that is the process. But nationalisation is not is in the people's minds now. But when I was involved in research on the Freedom Charter, which I keep on picking up every now and again, I'm not myself obsessed with nationalisation. Those clauses of the Freedom Charter are open to a range of interpretations. And you say, how did it find its way in? It's the wording implies that someone sat on the side and they just engineered these words. But you're not dealing with fools in the leadership, but also at the Congress of the People. Billy Nair, who's unfortunately dead, great trade unionist, and Ben Turok introduced the clauses on this and was approved with acclaim. But in that sort of assembly, there wasn't room for a lot of debate because of the time constraints. And in the end, the police halted the proceedings. However, the Freedom Charter as a whole, and these clauses as a whole, are not iconic documents, to use the word that is very popular at the moment, which I find tells us nothing. It's iconic implies something you worship. Now, the Charter is not like that. It is something to debate and to adapt to the times we live in.
Now, why did the African National Congress decide not to pursue nationalisation after 1994 and instead opted for a mixed economy model where caution was involved in pursuing both nationalisation and privatisation?
You see, what's interesting about the question is that nationalisation is only one of a range of issues that arose. In the late 1980s, the ANC start to review its economic policies, and I think COSATU had already been doing this. I think they met in Harare. Now, I was inside the country, so I didn't know what was going on there. I was inside the country, safely in South African prisons most of the 80s, or underground, so I didn't really participate in these discussions, but a document came on the Constitution in 1988 when I just came out of jail again and I was under house arrest. And what that document and other documents were trying to take into account were lessons drawn from signs of the collapse of the Soviet Union and other former communist-led states in Eastern Europe, but also lessons of Western Europe and other places. And the lessons were, in regard to nationalization, that nationalization is not a cure-all. In fact, it can be a problem. And equally, privatization is also not a cure for everything. And it was part of discussion over the growth path and developmental path of a new South Africa, and this started to be advanced. Now, until then, it also was a political thing. It was mixed to economic questions because ANC was under Marxist influence in the sense that people in the camps and so forth used to read Soviet books on seizure of power and all of these types of things. Consequently, the idea that people had was on one day everything would change. Now, COSATU had already been engaged in what I would call structural reforms. Now, structural reforms are not the same as on one day everything must happen. So that is being blurred a little bit by the Marxist-Leninist rhetoric, even in the Thabo Mbeki period, because one needs to understand what does it mean to operate in an economy where you cannot move forward without big capital in particular. Now that has implications for both big capital and for the poor and their supposed representatives in COSATU, ANC and so forth. So 1990 was when these things started to be advanced. However, 1994 is also very important because the ANC as an organization is not the same as the ANC as government. Now, what one used to find, I was in the leadership at the time, is what the government would do did not pass through ANC constitutional structures. One day, GEAR was born, the Growth, Economic and Redistribution document, and people like myself who were in the National Executive learnt of this in the newspapers, but was supposed to be an ANC document. So you have a new phenomenon emerging in 1994 where ANC is no longer ANC as organization. In fact, the organization starts to die. It's very weak organizationally, although I don't think you can generalize. You can go to some rural areas where it's quite strong. However, many documents, which may have been subsequently endorsed, did not, as they do not to this day, go through ANC constitutional structures originally. So when we say the ANC did various things, we must distinguish government and ANC. And we have to ask ourselves whether it is good for democracy, for the leading political organization in terms of votes and all of that, to no longer be based on strong organizational connections, because that means that people say you have to have a constituency and all of that, that they may have a constituency. Is it only for elections? If it's not only for elections, what is the internal democracy of the ANC?
Now, you have argued that although the call for nationalisation, which is currently being brought by Julius Malema, is premised on the Freedom Charter, pursuing such a policy might in fact damage the vision of that document. Can you elaborate?
Yeah, I don't want to pretend that I am the owner of the true vision of the Freedom Charter. The Freedom Charter is a document like the word freedom, like the word liberation, like the word emancipation, amongst others, over which we can argue. And one of the reasons I'm very happy to be here is I hope that what I say will engender debates. Because what we do not have at the moment is debate. People are busy attacking one another or going for positions or using words like icon to describe Mama Sisulu, Kada Asmal, all sorts of so-called revolutionary icons. Now the word is a substitute for analysis. The words National Democratic Revolution are used as an icon to bow to. Now my job in analysis, my responsibility as I see it, and I hope I can engender this with others, is to try to get discussion. Now, when the call is advanced, one of the interpretations, which is completely legitimate, is to say that nationalisation is an option or a possibility, or it's a legitimate conclusion to draw. However, it is not the only conclusion, because I don't think the Freedom Charter, written in 1955, is cast in stone, and the wording of the Freedom Charter is open to contestation, and what it will mean will ultimately be decided not in seminar rooms, but in struggles between different forces. But my hope is that we can move towards a pact which can be a basis for development, because you cannot have an emancipated society, by which I mean one where all talents of all people can grow as much as possible. We cannot have democracy as an ever unfolding process whereby we don't just go and vote every 5 years, but we have ways of finding expression. Now that needs an economic basis. I'm not saying the economy determines everything. And having that basis and that relationship between government, labour and capital requires responsibility from all. It doesn't really add to the development of such a growth path and developmental path if you have ad hoc strikes. What are they leading to? They're very important in terms of people's grievances. However, we need to find a way of bringing parties together. I don't mean political parties, interested parties. Now, capital, big capital, I have spoken to some people there, and the impression that I have is that there's a rigidity on that side as well. And there's a rigidity in the sense that people are saying there must be flexibility in the labour market, people must not be selfish and concentrate on organised labour. Now, organised employed labour, one person is supporting large numbers of people. And what I have been told is the more profits that are made, the more benefits that can go into social welfare, they'll be taxed and all of that. And it also is supposed to be beneficial to have a capital-intensive economy which doesn't employ a lot of people and all of this. So what my argument is, if we can unite a broad range of people who have not previously been together, however, who accept constitutionalism, who accept the need to safeguard our future, to have a future where industry is not threatened, where people's livelihood does not continue to be precarious. We need to be prepared to make compromises on all sides. And I think it's in the interests of capital, it's in the interests of labour. Now, I wouldn't have said this decade or so back, but I think I'm rethinking, and I think all of us must understand that the answers we give have to change as we face new conditions.
Now, based on that, you also warn that the current stance, as well as the tone of the rhetoric, is undermining the stable political and economic climate we require to bolster investment and employment. What do you think fidelity to the Freedom Charter would mean in the current context?
See, fidelity also implies that I have an answer, and I'm just one person who is interpreting the Freedom Charter, and I've said I would like to have an interpretation of the Freedom Charter and freedom in general, which is one which a broad range of people can embrace. And not everything that I want will be part of that vision, but I can continue arguing for it. But we try to find a way of embracing as broad a range of people. However, there is a difference between populism and popular. Populism I understand to mean demagogic phrases which may capture people's imagination because they are desperate. Popular is to refer to the actual needs and aspirations of ordinary people, black and white. So a lot of whites who are unemployed. So I am hoping that we can find a way of encouraging investors. There's also this problem of corruption, and patronage, which is being diverted because nationalisation is supported by sections of capital who plan to benefit from it. They do not plan to have the poor as the primary beneficiaries. So the rhetoric may relate to the working class and the poor, but the eyes are not focused on that. Now, our job is to find a way of ensuring that there's stability. There cannot be stability when everyone is giving tenders and contracts to their brothers, their cousins and aunts and whatever it happens to be, and under the guise and also nationalisation is meant to cream off some of the country's wealth, not to the poor, but to ordinary people. Now, nationalisation I don't exclude. It is still employed in various countries, and like privatisation, I don't think it must be a dogma.
Well, thank you very much for your insight, Raymond.
Thank you very much.
Donate now and give 15 Rand a month. SMS JOIN to 41486.